Ancient Tracks, a Beast Inquiry. Today we have Mike and Forrest take the lead on this one.
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Oh, great, Forrest. How are y'all doing?
Good. Well, this is my good friend Mike, and I'll leave off his last name if he wants to tell you what it is. That's certainly his prerogative. And I'm not going to say where he lives in Texas, but he is in Texas. And again, if he wants to give a description of his part of the country, he is more than welcome to. So, Mike, I want you just to jump right in there and tell us all about what's been going on your property ever since you got out there.
Oh, okay. Well, we came out here about 6 years ago, transplants from the city. It's East Texas. And I never believed in Bigfoot. I'd always thought, something that big would have either been in a zoo or a museum years ago. And it was kind of a running joke, like snipe hunting and all that kind of stuff. And the closest thing that I could relate to was seeing the abominable snowman, which to me was just a claymation character in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, And so I never thought it could be an actual real thing. I didn't give it much credence. And until I actually see one, I don't know that I'll be 100% convinced, but I'm about 99% convinced. We've never seen one, my wife and I, and we don't want to either. But our encounter, I guess you'd say, it's not visual, but we now both believe that something is there and something's going on, and it's leaving physical signs. And I'm on because I believe that other people have had similar occurrences, but they just brush them off as something else. And I think that it's only when they start to look closely around them that they'll see sign, and they'll see that these things are real, and they may even see one or two. And I think that with all the encroachment that we have on the wooded areas, with building subdivisions and industrial parks and so forth, et cetera, that it's just a matter of time, probably within the next 10 years, that one will be found, harvested. And with all the instant footage that we have from cameras everywhere, body cams, trail cams, phones, everything, drones and so forth, it's going to be captured on video when someone hits one with a truck, or the hunter's out there with a good high caliber rifle and takes one down, what have you. But it's hard, to tell people. Most people just think you're nuts, and and so you keep it to yourself when you start going on to this subject. Or if you're lucky like I am, I have you guys, to talk to, and the more people we have that know these are real, that can communicate together and work together in the research of it, I think that's also going to help propel this discovery as well. Our house is over 60 years old. We're outside city limits, and it backs up to a vast forest. The only access to our backyard is through the front, and so we would see intruders coming through our windows if we had any coming through. But I've got no trespassing signs, and I like to shoot my 45s and 50 caliber out in the backyard, because we're outside city limits. It's a great way to deter potential thieves, and it's fun. So that's what I can be found doing. And we've never had anybody caught snooping around our property. So it helps out. Now, when we first got here, the house had a bright mercury vapor street light out front that someone had put on a post, which you could, buy at the hardware store. And we thought it looked tacky and weird, so we cut it down. And now I'm starting to realize that they had it out there for a reason. That's what people call a booger light. It's you use bright lights, and it seems to keep these things from coming up to your house. And our events, they started in October 2022. When I was out of town, my wife heard a man's voice say, "Hey, from outside the glass door that goes to our house. And it was dark, it was night, so she couldn't see anybody because the light was reflecting inside. But she brushed it off, thought, oh, it must be an auditory hallucination or something, or maybe a neighbor across the highway or something, you know. And then she heard it again, and it was even louder. And she didn't see anybody, but it scared her so bad that she stayed out of that room and shut and locked the doors, you know, wouldn't go out there. Now, around the end of April, start of May 2022, we both heard a whoop come from the forest when we were returning home from family, visiting family. And I asked her, I said, have you heard that before? And she said she'd heard it, but she thought it was an owl. But it was way too powerful. It was distant, but you could tell it was not an owl. And so we like to go hiking, and we hike out at this state park that's about 20 minutes south of us. And it's heavily populated with deer and all kinds of wildlife. And of course, there's no hunting there, so the deer are protected from hunters. Well, we're hiking along the trail, and right in the middle of the trail, we look down and we see the torn off lower front legs of a deer lying placed side by side. And I looked at them and I thought, oh, those aren't cut off. And a poacher sure wouldn't leave sign that he's been poaching, and why would he cut the front legs off anyway? You know, I just thought that was really odd. And there were no insects around it either. And that just struck us as really odd. We didn't think Bigfoot at that time yet. But as these things kept occurring, we started putting it together. Now, December 2022, I was out of town, and between 10 and 11, my wife heard loud footsteps crunching around the backyard close to the back door that connects to our den. And she looked, but she didn't see anything. And she brushed it off. She thought, well, maybe it was a deer or a dog or something, you know, who knows. So now March 2023, I'm getting the bug. I'm wanting to hunt and get some deer, you know, now that we've got some land, we're out here where they come up right in the backyard. And so I take a jar of peanut butter and take the lid off, screw the lid to a tree about 5 feet up with some deck screws, cut the bottom out of the peanut butter jar, and then screw the jar back onto the lid on the tree. And this is a great way, they say, to lure deer. I think it's a better way to lure Sasquatch.
Right.
But yeah. So I left it there, and I wanted to check on it, see if I had any progress, see if I had any hoof prints, and if any deer had come up and licked on it. So I went out the next day. The jar was unscrewed, laying on the ground about 2 feet away, and 100% clean, as if someone had taken it and gone to a dishwasher and, you know, rinsed every tiny fragment out of it. There was nothing in there. And so I thought, well, that's weird. That's kind of an expensive, you know, way to lure deer. So I decided to buy apples instead. So a week later, I tossed out a whole bag of red apples out there in the same area and went and checked on it the next day, and there was not a trace, not a piece, nothing. And so I think around that time we'd started watching Finding Bigfoot, more for entertainment, you know, than anything else. We love, you know, Cliff and Bobo. And so I thought, well, you know, for the heck of it, I'm just going to do a call. So I did a couple of calls. I didn't get any replies back, but looking back at it, I think that's a real bad idea. If you're going to do calls, don't do them on your own property. Because about 2-3 days later, I went back out to my deer stand. I wanted to check and see if I had enough corn in it and see if I had any hoof prints around it. And there's a little creek that runs back there in the backyard where my deer stand is. It's like a little holler, and then we've got a little creek running down through the middle of that. And if you're down in there, no one can see you from the above higher ground level where the house and all that are. It provides a great hiding place. And so I go down there and I look, and I found a pile of dark seed field scat. It was about 6 inches in diameter by about 3 inches high. And it was like a grayish, bluish, black color. And it was just full of blackberry seeds. And you could tell by the water running around it that it must have reduced its size a little bit, washed some of it away. And that's when I started thinking, you know, we don't have black bear out here. We don't have anything that I can imagine that would be big enough. I mean, how many blackberries could a raccoon eat, you know, to do that? And so I started thinking, that's pretty odd. Maybe there's something out here, you know, that we don't know about. Now, March 23, or 2023 rather, we come back from visiting family. It was about 8 o'clock, and it was getting dark, but we had a little bit more light during that year, and it was still enough I could see in front of me and see around me. And I went down there to my feeder, and I never went down there that late, never. It was the first time I just figured I'll go check it and see if there, you know, needs to be more deer corn added if it's low, because I kind of felt like maybe it's running low. And I wanted to know because I was going to go buy a couple of bags of deer corn the next day. Needed to know how many I was going to buy. So I go down there, and as I get down there and I'm starting to lift the lid and look in, I heard a low, deep growl. It was like it wasn't like a dog or anything that I'd ever heard before. And unlike the other reports you hear, I didn't feel it in my body or vibrate or anything like it. It was just a very deep, low growl, but it triggered something in me primal that told me, you need to go back in the house. And I did not even think about standing my ground at all. I just, you know, I'm just going to go back in the house. I turned around and walked my happy little ass back in the house. And I told my wife, and we went through a gamut of it. Well, could it have been a cougar? Could it have been this? And no, I have no idea what it could have been. And I'd looked all around, and I didn't see anything. And it was 30 feet or so off to my left. And I looked and looked when I was hearing this thing. I didn't see anything. And that was what really freaked me out. I'm not one of the woo crowd. I don't believe that they can turn invisible and go through dimensions, but I can't explain it unless it was up in a tree, and I just didn't look high enough up in the tree. So that's probably what it was. But I started noticing weird things, like whereas before we had a lot of deer, we had families of raccoons and families of possum and tons of squirrels, tons of copperheads, tons of cottonmouths, a couple of armadillos, and some field mice. But we haven't had anything since May of 2023. And what was really strange, and this was what really made me start seriously believing that there was something going on beyond the usual understanding of animals. In May 2023, caught a field mouse in our house. I had one of those green plastic humane traps, you know, that you can buy at Walmart. It's tubular, about 6 inches long by about 1.25 inches in diameter. And I put it outside on a white vinyl plastic shelf that we kept gardening implements on. And I was going to dispose of it when I came back from my out-of-town trip. I just wanted to keep it away from the house because the mouse was still inside and alive. Now, these traps, it's a hard, clear green plastic. You can see through it. It's transparent. It's got a sliding door on one end that slides up and a spring-loaded door on the other end that you can push in with a finger. The only way you're going to get this mouse out, aside from busting the thing into pieces, is with opposable thumbs, with a finger that you can push that spring-loaded thing in while you're gripping it or sliding the other door up. This is not something that a hawk or any other animal is going to be able to do. And keep in mind, I put it on the middle shelf of the white vinyl plastic shelf, so a hawk or other animal is not going to see it from above. So I came back from my trip, and I went out there to get the thing and dispose of it, and it was gone. I looked down on the ground next to it because there was this obvious smear. It was like 2 fingers had smeared 2 lines, like 4 or 5 inches long, like someone had swiped the mud, you know. And I thought, well, maybe it was a hawk that came down and got this thing, you know, in my assumption. You know, something flew down and grabbed it, and that was its tail, you know, or its other claw hitting the ground or something. So I didn't think much of it. I brushed it off. And it left the smudge, and so I just figured some kind of animal must have took it. And I asked my wife, I said, did you take that and dispose of it or something? She said, no. She didn't know anything about it. So what was really weird to me was I was going to mow my yard, and I went through and cleared my whole yard because I don't want to run over any cans or anything, you know, any kind of paper or nothing, have to go picking it all up. So I go through my whole yard, I clear it, make sure there's nothing there, and I'm on my riding mower. Now imagine a horseshoe shape with the house in the middle. That's my front and my backyard. I have to go around. Then I come back around, you know. I had done 3 passes along the edge of the wood where the forest meets my backyard. I'd done 3 passes with a 42-inch cut. So it was a good stretch, about, you know, 7 or 8 feet that I'd already mowed. When I came back around the 3rd time, that trap was laying right there in the center of where I'd already mowed. It was intact. And I set my mower to the lowest setting possible, which would have shattered it into a million little pieces. There's no way it could have run over that and not seen it. And it was empty. And that was what freaked me out and made me realize something was watching me from the forest. Ran out there and put that empty trap back after I'd mowed. And then I started thinking about it. And yeah, I still have the trap, and that's what made me realize something with an opposable thumb was out there. Now, another time after that, I'm on the road, and my wife heard loud wood knocks that sounded like they were coming from our backyard. And they began at a frequency, you know, 1, and then a couple of minutes later, there'd be another one. But it started getting kind of frantic and hectic and increasing, and the intervals between decreased. And she said it was very loud. Even the cat in the house was noticing it, and she had the TV on, and this is through the wall of the den. And she felt like it was on the tree just outside of the house, just right up against the house. It scared her so bad, she felt like if she went in front of a window, whatever was out there would have seen her. And so she didn't. But she made sure not to turn any lights on in the house or walk past any windows or do anything. And it was pretty scary for her. So she told me about it. When I came back, I found a smooth area on our pine tree back about 50 yards from the house, where it was rubbed smooth, like someone had been knocking on it with a rock or hitting on it with a smooth piece of wood. But it's still there. And above that smooth area, there was also a tree limb that had been snapped off, just folded over, about a 1.25 inch diameter pine tree limb. And it was pointed towards the house. I had to cut that off with a saw and put that in the burn pile to get rid of it. So I started figuring I'm going to look around here and see what else I can find, And I searched the backyard and found a tree that was ripped out of the ground. The roots snapped off, the bark stripped off the top branches, and it was thrown up into the fork of a bigger tree about 12 foot high. And she had also heard around June 2023, she heard multiple loud owl hoots. And this is, again, I'm out of town. This is the pattern that we have, which is terrifying her because she wonders, why does it come around when I'm gone? My theory is I think it's a rogue male that's been kicked out of the troop. When they get to a certain age, perhaps puberty, they get kicked out and they're sent to go do their own thing. But anyway, she heard these hoots. And on my return, we both heard them. And she was saying, you see that? You hear that? And I listened. It didn't sound like a normal owl to me. It sounded like a much bigger, like a guy imitating an owl, like an 800-pound owl, as they say. And it was too deep, too loud, and too close. And that's when I started getting worried. So I'm looking around the property at this point, I'm searching. I found a possible footprint. It didn't have toes to it. It was in red clay that had dried, and the heel is much deeper than the rest of it, and it's going uphill towards the house. And then we found next to the tree is this large, weird sandstone-looking rock with odd grooves and holes in it. It looks like something that came from far away or a cave or somewhere. It doesn't look indigenous to this area at all. And we still have the rock. And it was, like I said, lying next to the pine tree where the limb was broken. I think it was used to beat on the tree with. And now July, my wife heard 3 hoops in succession coming from our next door neighbor's stock pond a few weeks before the last tree, and the other one was found damaged, and the next morning broken and pointing towards the house. And we found trees back on the back of our property, 6 inches, 8 inches in diameter, big trees, 12, 14 feet high, that are healthy trees that are just broken, just snapped over. Weird, just weird stuff. And when they're snapped over, they're pointed towards our house. So we have not seen a Bigfoot. We don't want to, but we always have a creepy feeling in our backyard, especially late at night, or at least we did during those times. And we also noticed that we had a very strong, lingering skunk smell. It would linger for hours, but we never have seen a skunk. So, these are things that people have happen, and they brush it off. They think, oh, it's a possum. Oh, it's an owl. Oh, it's a this. Oh, it's a that. But if they don't go out and investigate, check it out and look, they're not going to, learn that these things are real. For a while, we just brushed a lot of these things off, but the activity and the things got to such a point that we couldn't deny it. And the one final thing that made us realize these things are real, they're here, is we'd gone out to her garden, my wife's garden. She's got a big garden. And she went to go pick her green beans. And we built what we call a green bean tunnel, which is a couple of hog panels bent up into a loop or a hoop, and then fastened to T-post. And that enables her to grow the green beans up, onto that, and she doesn't have to bend down. She can reach up and pick them. And it's probably the roof of it, as you'd call it, would be about 6 foot. And then the leaves and everything surround both sides. So when you're in it, no one can see you. Well, she went to go pick the green beans. She went to harvest, and there were none in there. None. None on the ground either. Someone had come through and picked every one of them out of there. And how they could do that in the dark, without a flashlight, without our neighbors across the highway or anyone seeing this or us seeing it through the window, means they had to have been in the dark, or it had to have been at some weird hour. And we looked around some more, and the little metal rabbit fence that we have that goes along the back of the garden, keep rabbits out, it had been stepped on, and it had kind of a V crush effect to the fence, where something had stepped on it and then lifted its foot back up, but it had crushed it down, leaving that shape in the fencing material. And we looked further, and we found 4 okra plants, full grown, which are pretty stout. If you're going to pull an okra plant out of the ground, you better have some muscles. 4 of them were pulled right out of the ground and laid side by side, which was very odd, and all the okra was pulled off of it, of course. But the most impressive thing, and the final thing that made us believe, close by, looking into the raised garden bed next to it, where we had a soaker hose going all during, the season, a footprint, a bare human-like footprint, but it was wider than a human's, and it was about a size 9.5 to a 10 men's. Put my foot next to it. It was pretty close to mine. That's why we're pretty sure it was a juvenile, and it was just a fantastic print. I'd sent a picture of Cliff Berkman, who was like, "Man, you should have cast that in plaster." Didn't have any. It was a Sunday when we found it. Couldn't have gone and gotten any plaster and made it back, and it was so wet that we were afraid it was going to, deteriorate. So I just took pictures of it, and believe Forrest has that one too. But these things are real. They are, in my opinion, they're an undiscovered primate that's clever enough to avoid capture, strong enough to avoid capture. There are certain people that don't want them known to the public for whatever reason, I don't know. But I think that they're responsible for the disappearance of thousands of people from state parks and other parks. And that could be part of it. Maybe they're afraid of the lawsuits that would ensue from the families of those people. I believe they're older than us. They're very skilled at hiding. They can mimic sounds, and they do, to lure people outside. I don't think that there's any woo ability or magical powers or mind speak or anything, but I think that they're just very clever and very skilled at what they do. They're flesh and blood. But I also think with the advancements that we've had in guns and in cameras, I think I'd say in 10 years, one will be brought in, and whoever the people are that cover these up, they won't be able to cover them up any longer. Yeah, I keep a loaded 50 cal, and my wife doesn't go hiking alone. We don't hike alone. We hike together if we go. And we see the woods different,
One thing, Mike, about everything you've told us, a lot of characteristics of what other people do see. And, I think more and more people are realizing, there's something out there.
Mm-hmm. I just think that we're coming on a cusp in society where we're going to uncover them. It's inevitable.
Well, I think that we're realizing, like yourself, that you don't necessarily have the flesh and blood critter standing right in front of you to realize they're around you. And I think that there's a lot of people that encounter footprints and some of the strange tree situations, the twisted limbs, the broken limbs, all of that's going on. And I think they realize that's not deer, that's not raccoons, that's not, any of the small woodland creatures doing that. There's something else out here doing that. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of a fear that do I really want to admit that that's what's possibly out here? But and I think y'all kind of felt that way a little bit too, from what I gather at the very first. It's like something's going on here, but do I really want to think that it might be Bigfoot? But I think you had an epiphany when you saw the mouse trap, don't you?
Yeah, it was so weird. And like I said, I don't believe in mind speak, but it was comical because it almost felt like something was saying, "More mice, please."
Right.
It was just weird. And I thought, damn, this thing could move that fast to wherever it was that was hidden from my view when I was on the mower, run up into the yard, put that right there, and then get back where it was out of view. That freaked me out because I thought, oh my God, this thing could grab me and run off with me or my wife and put one hand over your mouth and break your neck, and nobody would know what happened to you, where you went. I think that happens all too often.
I think you're right.
Well, I think they're masters of their own universe,
Yeah. I think I think this one, I feel like it's gone. We haven't had anything happen in a long time. And I feel like it's gone. I think it kind of gave up when it couldn't lure my wife outside and it had depleted all of the resources out here. There's nothing. There's no animals out here. I mean, they're going to slowly come back, but there's nothing out here for it. So it moves on and goes somewhere else. So my wife started looking online at Google Maps and noticed that there's kind of an open corridor between our area and that state park. And she thinks that the young one that was kicked out of the troop, the juvenile, may have either gotten kicked out of the troop or it may have been curious and wanted to go and go on adventures and watch the humans and see what goes on at their homes, and watch us and observe, It's a primate. It's, bipedal. It's got a pretty good sized brain, so it must have a curiosity, like cats are pretty curious, So I think that they come through, they can either shelter up in trees or behind deadfall trees or, wherever, and observe and watch, learn, eat the available resources. But then when those resources get low, they get desperate and they'll resort to trying to lure humans out or they'll go somewhere else. And I think that's what this one did. It didn't have any success, so it went off. But I don't know if I would be successful. I'm a pretty damn good shot. But if we ever have problems again that get far beyond that, I might have to try and take one down. And that sounds crazy, but we need one. They need a body.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's crazy. People ask me if we'd have hit that juvie, that one that we saw in the middle of the road that night, what would I have done with it? And Chuck knows I've got a plan.
Yep. And
I know exactly where I'd take it. I don't care if it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I already told my vet, if I come knocking on your door at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll know what it's all for. So, he's about the only person around here that I would trust implicitly. So, but, I think and you and I had talked about this, Mike, about that I was really kind of fearful for your wife, because it's peculiar. I started to say it was funny. It's not ha-ha funny. It's peculiar that I kind of have the same situation here, whereas when it's just Jessica and me around the home here, then we were having activity. If I ever have any males around here, then it's like they don't like that. We've had rocks and stuff thrown at the house, and various things like that, and they don't like it. And
well, I can relate to what you're saying, and you know exactly where I'm headed with that.
Yeah. But let me finish here just a second, Chuck, and then you tell what you're relating to, because you and I have discussed that over and over and over again.
Right.
What scares me, and this is what I told Mike, is that and you can agree or disagree with me on this one, but I do have a degree in anthropology, so I know a little bit of what I speak. These really relate to a lot of chimpanzee-like behavior. And as disgusting as it may sound, male chimpanzees will take a liking to human females. And unfortunately, they have even been known in a pet situation to even attempt to rape their human owners. I can't even talk. And I'm sorry if you're hearing our alarm go outside. I can't. The window's open here. I can't. I can't. Even if I close it, you'll still hear it. So I apologize. Anyway, that's what kind of frightened me about that whole scenario, because every time you left, then that's when it started up. If I'm correct on that assessment there, Mike. And it's frightening. And I know your wife was intimidated and frightened about the situation, and she did the right thing. She stayed in, she ignored it. And, what I would do is just close the windows and close the curtains, and, and they'll either lose interest or, they'll get mad and throw things at the house, and hopefully that's all that they're going to do. So, but yeah, I've had rocks thrown at the house when we've had males around here, and they don't like it. And so that indicates to me that they're probably males that are out there watching the house. Now, Chuck, you take yours away with your hairy girlfriend.
Oh yeah, okay. So I'm not gonna say where this is at, but it's here in Oklahoma, and a buddy of mine has a camping place there, and a house that's he put there, and it's to go out and look for these things and do research and stuff like that. Well, there's a female that comes around the property quite a bit. She's been seen many times. I actually casted her print. And anyway, she has this infatuation with me and the guy who has the cabin. And back in October, I had some friends from Pennsylvania that wanted to come down, females that wanted to come down and do an expedition down in this area. And so we got there, and the female tends to, if she knows you're there, she will actually come up on the deck of the cabin and grab a hold of the doorknob, and you can hear her trying to open up the doorknob and get into the cabin. And she doesn't get angry unless me or this buddy of mine has women around us.
Well, you know what your first mistake was?
What's that?
Well, you made a lifelong commitment when you casted that print.
Oh, don't say that. Well, you know what? It kind of feels
He's like,
that way.
he's mine. She said, that's mine. That's my man. He casted my print.
Well, unfortunately, she's after two of us.
Well,
But
he kept it.
Like a bad Jerry Springer episode.
Maybe bigger.
oh yeah.
I was
But
like, put the ring on the finger, Chuck.
Here's what she does though. This is the deal.
Chuck, wait a minute. Maybe bigamy is the thing with Bigfoot.
Oh gosh, don't go there.
I'm sorry I interrupted.
So when I had these two women with me down there, and they're like sisters to me. They call me their little brother. But anyway, I've done research with them before and been on expeditions with them, and they're really nice people. But the thing is, the time that they were down there with me, the very last night we were there, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we hear the door handle jingling like she was trying to get in the cabin. And later on, probably about 10 or 15 minutes later, we get rocks being pelted on the cabin. That's never happened down there before this. I mean, that's never taken place until this. And rocks were hitting the cabin, and all of us heard it. And the very next day we left. Well, my buddy that owns the cabin, he took his girlfriend there the day after. Well, he shows up and he goes out to the cabin to turn the water on and the AC and all that. And he gets this distinct smell. And he knew what it was when he smelled it. And he decided, it's time for me to get into the cabin and get her in the cabin for safety's sake. And no longer did he get into the cabin. Wasn't long. He started getting pebbles thrown at him at the cabin. So the funny thing is Forrest kind of said that me and him have this girlfriend that she gets really jealous when we have females around with us and tries to, scare them off, I guess. So that is the joke. But, I listened to you talking about your wife and the experiences that she's had when you're not around. That's could be, I can tell that she's probably terrified when that stuff happens.
Oh yeah.
I think
that's what makes me think it's a juvenile.
Yeah, it's not a very good situation. Mm-hmm. And you just think about that stuff and it's got to be a terrifying experience for her especially.
Well, I'm going to interject something here too, Mike. It could very well be a male juvenile, but it also could be a rogue male. And you have to keep that in mind too, because if they conduct their social groupings like gorillas or chimpanzees, you're going to have the alpha male and possibly a few beta males that they might have around that absolutely behave themselves around the females. But there's going to be those males that they're going to get ousted. And trust me, the beta males are always looking to get rid of the alpha, the first opportunity. And, and once that happens, that male gets completely kicked out. Very rarely do they really allow them to hang around. Sometimes they do on the outskirts of the group, but they really prefer that they just go on their merry way. So that's the thing is that you got to consider that this possibly could be a rogue male as well. So just keep that in mind. I mean, you're doing the right thing by if you go hiking, you go together and you go armed. And, she just doesn't ever need to be, neither one of you ever need to be out there by yourselves.
No.
I guess it's
no.
like.
I don't even think it's safe for people when they break down in their car on a highway near where you have wooded areas on each side of the highway to get out of their car. Stay in your car, folks. Call AAA. Get AAA. Get you a AAA membership. Call AAA. Stay in your car. Don't get out. Don't matter how hot it is or how cold it is. If you got to roll the window down a quarter inch or something to get some air, whatever you got to do, stay in your car. She was paralleled when she was hiking by herself. She heard footsteps crunching. She didn't see what it was, but she could hear it over her earbuds listening to a show or some music. And she took her earbuds out and just acted real calm and just didn't run. She walked over to the car and got the hell out of there. But she won't go hike by herself anymore. And I don't know if they're just curious and they want to, watch us and observe and learn, but there's way too many people that have disappeared in the forest for my thinking that these things are not involved. To me, they're definitely the biggest cause. Now, I'm sure some people get killed by, people, dope growers or meth lab people out there or whatever, but I'm just about certain that 90% of them are victims of these damn things. And there's too many accounts of people being attacked by them.
I think I've told y'all all about, I know Chuck's familiar with the story, and I think I told you, Mike, too, about the young lady that in the car incident out.
That's horrifying.
In East Texas, far East Texas. And and she actually was on the phone with her mom. She was on the phone with dispatch and why she ever got out of her freaking car. Because once you're separated from that vehicle, it's, that is a source of protection. And you do have to realize that, you do have glass, you do have steel in between you and whatever is out there, including people. They've got to break in to get into it. And we really don't hear of any accounts where these Bigfoot like to actually break in. And I mean, I had an encounter where I had nothing more than a window pane between me and one. And I'm not going to say it's not frightening because the thought was going through my mind. All I've got is a plate of glass between me and it. If it, the window wasn't big enough for it to come through, but it certainly was big enough for it to reach in and grab and jerk me through. So, that's, you have to keep these things in mind, but you really are safer inside your car than you are outside the car, because you get outside the car, you're in their environment. So,
and we speculate that they have an actual language with the Sierra sounds and others, and they could, because to some degree, it's like they have a set of rules, Now, I'm sure they have gone into homes, and you can tell more about that here in a minute, Forrest. But generally speaking, they usually, it's like some parental communication must have occurred when they were young, telling them, you can do this, but you can't do that. You can't go into their home. You can't go into their tent, or you can't go into their car, or whatever. You can only do this. It's weird. So there must be some type of language communication, some sort, that they're instructed as to what their limits are, and then there's a point where all bets are off, and it's rather peculiar, but it does exist, because you hear a lot about that.
Yeah, we won't even talk about my episode with the having one in the cabin. So, and I think didn't you have an open door on the cabin one time when y'all were up there, Chuck?
Well, about a week or two after I had casted her print, my son and I, my son went up there with me. About 2 weeks after that, me and my son both heard the jingling on the doorknob, and lucky for me, I had locked the door, and but I sat there and listened to her as she was jingling the knob. And about 2 weeks later, my buddy and who owns the cabin and three other guys, two guys from Colorado and another guy we both know, they went out there and they've spent a couple of days out there to do research. And two of the guys were from Colorado, and they went out there and messed around, looked around, and trying to find stuff. Well, the last night that they were there, the two guys from Colorado had to get up early in the morning and to get their flight back to Denver. And during the night, one of them got up to go to the bathroom, and when he got up, he thought he saw something at the front door. And I think the first guy dismissed it, and the second guy saw it. And the very next morning, when they got up to get ready to go to leave, the front door was open. And anyway, when they saw that the front door was open, they realized that there was a possibility that she actually came into the cabin. And my belief is, because I've heard stories about those kind of events happening. One was at a Girl Scout place, and anyway, I called my buddy, and he called me and told me what happened. I told him, I said, I think she came into the cabin. She was looking for you guys, wanted to see what was going on. And I don't know if that's true or not, but I had this feeling that she went ahead and come on in when she opened up the door, because the door was wide open that morning when they got up.
That's terrifying. That is scary. Mike, I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
when your wife heard the hay,
Yeah.
I'm wanting to know if it was trying to mimic you. Did she say whether she could tell that or not?
Well, you know what? I do a version. When I do it, it's probably deeper than it actually was. But she said, yeah, looking back, that she thought it was me. But she was in a room which is, has a glass, the door on its glass. So you would have to be outside. It's the only place you could be where you would be, making any noise. And she said at first it was like a whisper almost. But then when she didn't respond, it was louder, more insistent the next time it did it. But it only did it 2 times, and she got out of the room and, left. But yeah, she did say that the first time she heard it, she thought it was me.
She thought it was you.
So, yeah. So they are mimics. I'm just glad that we never call each other when we're out in the yard, that we never call each other by our names,
That's what I was going to ask next.
Because I've heard of that happening, with other people. They'll, call their animals, their kids, call out the wife's name, call the husband's name, trying to lure them. Some people say maybe they're just like parrots and they just, mimic for the sake of mimicking. I don't think so.
I don't either.
Strategy, and I think it's a strategy to lure you out there. That's why they'll imitate baby sounds. Anyone with any sense of decency is going to respond to a crying baby. It's imbued in our DNA to get the baby to stop crying, and they'll do that. They'll do children sounds. They'll do all kinds of sounds that are what we as humans would respond to,
I've had the baby crying sound.
Oh, that's so creepy.
It is creepy. Remember that, Chuck?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Across the road?
And
there wasn't anything over there, and I knew that. So it just was, that's a baby. That sounds like a baby.
Me and you and your brother actually heard barred owls one night out there, and it sounded like 3 barred owls, but one of them wasn't a barred owl.
Yeah.
And when it let loose, it sounded like a ticked off chimpanzee.
Yeah, it did. It sounded very frustrated that its little owl, well, I shouldn't say little, because like what Mike said, an 800-pound owl,
Yeah.
when nobody was responding, it went really crazy.
They really are pretty decent when it comes to mimicking.
Hmm. But you just can tell that slight difference. Mike, you said that she was out hiking and was being paralleled.
Yeah.
Was that on your property?
No, that's about 20 minutes south of us at that state park, where we later
So,
found the deer legs, torn off front deer legs,
so
and we
maybe
went
not
and
the
hiked
same
together.
individual that was on your property, maybe a completely different.
I think, well, I think that there are troops of them
Mhm.
that live at that park, and I think that what we have is uh, a juvenile male that came from there. And this is what I wonder about. If their sense of smell is so developed that they will follow people, that they will track people, if maybe it tracked her, I don't know. That might be a bit far-fetched. They could just be going out to areas away from that park to try and start their own troops and habitats, and that's what we had encountered, was either a rogue or a juvenile male that was trying to start its own
That's a very
troop.
interesting synopsis that you gave, though.
Well, yeah, that's what I think. That, and I can't swear out that they don't track people by sense of smell. I mean, yeah, look at bloodhounds. So it makes me wonder
Right.
if this thing caught her perfume or antiperspirant or something when she was hiking, and there we go, starts looking around. But I don't think that we have any activity anymore out here for several months. I think it, like I said, when the resources were gone, it lost its incentive to come out here. It couldn't get her to respond, and that was its last ditch effort because it ran out of resources. I think when they do run out of resources in a populated area of people, I think that we just kind of look like suckling pigs to them. Oh, well, I'll just eat this human over here if I can get them to come outside.
Right. Scary thought. But yeah.
Yeah. But I think that they're older than Homo sapiens sapien. I think they're a primate. I think they're on the tree. I think that something interrupted their evolution. I mean, these things, they don't use fire. They don't use tools as such that we know, other than hitting rocks or sticks against trees. Something interrupted their evolution. In my opinion, I could be way wrong. They could be as evolved as they're going to be, like gorillas and such. But I just feel like they're on that tree towards what we became, but they just didn't get there. Something happened that interrupted it. A few of them survived, and I've heard people say that they were here and witnessed, what the Anglos did to the Native Americans, and that's their motive for hiding. But I don't know. They tend to hide in all the other countries where they're found by different names,
Right.
And I think that that's just a trademark, a hallmark of how they've survived, not because of seeing one particular instance of annihilation of other people, but just to avoid capture. I'm sure that they've been shot at and killed and so forth, and that's another reason why I feel that there's a form of communication with them between the young ones and the older, just as we have. So they're telling them, in whatever language they're using, whether it's sign of some sort, or verbal of some sort, or pictograph, or whatever they're doing, to avoid us, stay away from humans. But I think they're very independent as well, and so you're going to get different behaviors from individuals, just as we have.
Very intelligent too.
Oh, scary.
Yeah.
Scary intelligent. I mean, these are things they're doing they far exceed what the smartest dogs do on stupid pet tricks, you know. It's like they know how we're going to respond, you know, and how to elicit those responses from us.
Right.
And yeah, it's interesting, and I still feel that as the habitat for them dwindles and we encroach more and more and we become more advanced audio and visual wise and technology, it's inevitable. It's going to be probably in the next 10 or 20 years that
I think you're right.
they're going to have to be admitted, you know, that they exist. I also feel like when that happens, probably the government's going to try and say, oh, that they're just herbivores, they're harmless, what have you.
Yeah, I think you're right with this thing eventually coming out, because you look at the UFO stuff and all the videos and everything else they got going on, they can't cover that up anymore. And I think the situation with Bigfoot is going to be the same way. It's going to get to a point where they can't deny it anymore.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the longevity of them existing, most primatologists and anthropologists, you know, say that the general conception is that primates such as the great apes separated from humans 5 to 6 million years ago. I think it was actually longer than that. I'd push it back even a lot further back than that. But you find that the great apes, especially your chimpanzees, your orangutans, actually they stay quite separated from humans. They don't actually act like they want too much interaction amongst humans at all. It's usually your other lower primates, your monkeys, that do far more interaction with humans than even your great apes do. They just they don't really. They're smart enough to know that it's kind of like the danger, danger, stranger, danger. You know.
Yeah.
I always remember the robot, and what show was it? Some space show that we used to watch as kids. And
yeah.
Danger,
Lost
danger,
in space.
Robin. You know. Yeah. And I always think about that when I say that. But anyway, I think that that is the situation, that you find that your great apes, like your gorillas and your chimps and all varieties of chimps, from the bonobos to the pan troglodytes, which is your common chimp, and then you got the billy apes or bondi apes, whatever they're going to call them. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they've actually given them a taxonomic name yet, but they pretty much stay separated from us. It's like they're smart enough to know that we're just not worthy of cohabitation. So,
yeah, to me, it's almost like the smaller those primitive primates are, the less intelligent they are. The bigger they are, the more intelligent they are. You've seen a lot of
the great apes have bigger brains. Yeah.
Not only the bigger brain, but the memory, the capacity to rationalize and see things, like when they taught Coco to do sign language, and she spoke about how she saw her parents killed.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure that they can communicate in some form to each other and tell each other, oh, human bad, stay away from human.
Yeah.
But whereas the little bitty, stupid little monkeys that you see, you know, at these beach resorts running up and drinking out of people's drinks, they have no fear of humans at all. They don't care. You know, they're just idiot little animals. But
they're very food motivated.
Yeah. You know, or the ones that utilize sex. What is it, bonobos?
Yeah, the bonobos. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime there's a disagreement or an argument, they resolve it with. They're just little sex addicts.
I'll be okay. And it usually is, surprisingly enough.
Very, very primal. You know, and their responses are very limited But yeah, I think that these are similar in some ways to great apes, but more advanced. I think they're somewhere in between great apes and us. And I think that they were clever enough and big enough and tough enough and strong enough to maintain that apex predator position. And they've got little tricks, like they'll get behind trees, they'll go up in trees, they'll get down in valleys and, and hollers and low-lying places. And they've got their own built-in ghillie suit, They can just pull a pile of leaves in on top of them, and there you go. It's like a mound of dirt.
There have been sightings that people have actually made, and when they've seen them sleeping, and basically they had no idea that whether it was a sleeping bear or what it was. I tend to agree with you there, But the history of primates is such that it's always expanding all the time because they're making new discoveries, and they're finding now that there are primates that were exhibiting, Oreopithecus especially, that was exhibiting a bipedalism. And it was kind of similar to orangutans. Orangutans do a lot of bipedal walking in the trees, even though they're holding on to something while they're doing it. And these primates were doing that. And so I think bipedalism in certain groups of primates probably developed at an early time, and that there was just one or two that survived. And I mean, and there's people out there that say there's different types of Bigfoot, and I would tend to agree with them in some respects. And they've developed bipedalism. I know Meldrum for a long time. They're part of the Gigantopithecus blacki, but we don't even know if they were really bipedal or quadrupedals. We don't have enough of their skeletons. If the Chinese would quit grinding them up for their pharmaceuticals, we would probably have a lot more of them to look at. We just don't know whether they were bipedal or quadrupedal or what they were. They tend to think that they were probably more orangutan-like. And if that's the case, then they would have exhibited some type of bipedalism in an arboreal setting. I think that bipedalism has existed in primates. I think it's just that that it seems that Bigfoot took it, and in the evolutionary pattern of things, was able to perfect it.
I think that cataclysmic flooding probably encouraged bipedalism, the animal to breathe above the waterline in areas that were flooded.
Well, there's some primatologists that actually believe that our bipedalism developed in water. I don't know if that was the case. It could possibly be. I try to stay open-minded because people are making discoveries all the time. All the time. I mean, we used to think that there weren't even any archaic human types, prototypes out there that existed even into Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon and even Homo sapiens sapien times. And now we're finding out that that's not the case, that there were archaic forms of humans that existed long, long after what we thought that they would have already died off. And they were cohabiting the earth the same time as Neanderthals and your Cro-Magnon man. Never say never.
Yeah, it's just, I think that if everyone, and I mean everyone, that lives near rural forested areas will just open their eyes and their ears and listen and look around carefully on their property, I think we'll find a lot more people experiencing this than we would have ever thought. But it's just so easy. We did it ourselves, my wife and I. We brushed this off for the better part of over a year and a half before it finally just you got the big footprint there in the raised garden bed, and it's like, okay, we believe now. But they do. Everyone brushes this off. You might see something dart across the highway midnight or so when you're driving down rural road, and it's just a big giant feral hog, or it was a black bear.
It was just a shadow.
Yeah. They're here.
Mike, how has it been since you've had any activity? I know you said it's been a while.
Let me look here, because I've tried to keep everything chronological. I want to say September 2023 was probably around. I'll have to check the timestamp on the picture I took of the footprint, but I'm gonna guess around that time. After the footprint, that was pretty much it. It had gone through the garden, found what it liked, found what it didn't like, and I think that was its last resort, because that was its last resource.
Yeah.
And it had given up on trying to lure my wife outside. And after that, it's like, I'm just going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Look for a female somewhere else and food sources somewhere else. Maybe it went back to the park, but that's what I think happened. Because we haven't heard anything. No hoops, no tree knocks, no owl, sounds, no footprints, nothing. And it's been, pretty dead. Of course, we haven't heard any other animals either.
Right.
Now we're starting to get frogs back in the stock pond next door. That's really it. I mean, we still don't even have our raccoons or anything back. It's just weird.
Next comes snake, then you got the raccoons, everything starts showing back up. Forrest, I have a question. The 4 okra plants laid side by side, that's deliberate. What do you think about that?
I haven't a clue. They do bizarre things. It's kind of like me walking out in the backyard, and all of a sudden I've got I have a caliche driveway, and down the center of the caliche driveway, there's large pieces of caliche that didn't make it through the crusher, and so they're quite, anywhere from 2 to 3 inches across, and to 4 and 6 inches across. And I walked out in the yard one time, and lined up in a perfect line between the house and the dog kennel was this line of caliche rocks. And that was just about the most bizarre thing I had ever seen. And it was had no rhyme nor reason. And the thing was that they were almost perfectly. Now I don't know how yours were, Mike, but on the okra plants, but the rocks were almost, every one of them were almost a foot apart perfectly. And
were they the same size?
No, they were all different sizes. It wasn't like they were the same size. They're all different sizes, but they were lined up, and they were about a foot apart, and they were in a perfectly straight line. And it went for, I guess about 6-7 feet. And I just thought, okay, well, now where did this come from? It was just weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like they have a mathematical mind.
I agree with you.
I mean, obviously it means something to them. Maybe we're just too stupid to figure it out. I don't know, but I mean, it means something to them. But it didn't mean anything to me, except that I got rocks, a dozen or so rocks out across my backyard, lined up in a perfect line. So, and my dog does not play with rocks. Now, if I came out there and found big sticks lined up like that, I would say, "Oh, Lackada's been at it again."
Well, I think if people watch the YouTube videos on Coco communicating with people by sign language, that they'll get a rough idea of how smart these things are. I think these things may be smarter than the great apes. Well, they would have to be. I mean, the great apes have been captured, they've been killed, put in captivity. These things haven't yet. So they're able to outdo them in that capacity. But it's eerie when you see how intelligent Coco is. And she was not just a random one that they picked, just that just happened to have a really high IQ. I'm sure all of the great apes are along that same average capacity intellectually. I think that's what we're dealing with, and I'm sure that there are some that exhibit psychopathy, sociopathy, antisocial, behaviors where they get kicked out of the troop, extreme violence, all kinds of things, and some are probably benevolent to some degree. But to me, they're just a big, dangerous animal that you can't communicate with.
Well, I always get I've had people ask me, well, if you're an anthropologist, why don't you go out in the woods and track them? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I have no interest in doing that. And that's the one thing that I always say. Of course, I always liken their behavior to chimpanzees, and chimpanzees are not my favorite of all the primates. It's my least favorite. I have no interest in going out in the woods and tracking around and trying to find a Bigfoot family and analyze them, their behavior patterns and everything else. Because first off, you know what? I don't think they'd let me do that. No. I think these animals are not going to be the type of primate that would even begin to do that. I mean, Jane Goodall went out and studied chimpanzees and was nearly killed on 2 occasions by male chimpanzees. And that doesn't get talked about. All people talk about is, the wonderful work that she did, but they never talk about all the trials and tribulations she went through trying to get to that point. No, I'm not going to go out there and track them. And
no.
I told Chuck the other night, if I could have a house like one of these ranger houses that's way up in the air, and that I knew that there were Bigfoot around there, and I could watch them and put up cameras that I could watch them and study their behavior and stuff like that, then that might work. And Chuck even volunteered to come stay too,
right,
and help me. But I wouldn't want to go live in a amongst a group of them, and I don't think you have. Chuck had been out there researching with Chuck and other people. I don't think there's any of us that are going to say no. I want to be first on that list to go out there and study those critters, because I'm not. I'm just not.
And that's the conundrum of them, in my opinion. Anything that can snap over a 6-inch or greater diameter tree like it did in our backyard, that's that powerful, you're not going to capture it. I mean, you'd have to know its body weight in order to shoot it with a tranq dart, and even then you're going to have a cage that can keep this thing captive. How strong is that going to have to be? What's it going to be made out of? And how are you going to feed it safely without getting your arm ripped off through the bars? I don't think that one will be maybe an infant or a juvenile maybe could be taken captive and observed. But I think that they're going to have to take one in on a slab, figure out what makes them tick, what they're all about, how advanced they are, and may have to get a couple of them to get a good sample, get a female, get a male, get a juvenile.
Now that, you're not even going to get a natural behavior out of an infant, because if you take an infant and have to raise it, because most chimpanzees, gorillas, monkeys, all of them are fed when they're fed, and maybe an orphan stage, or even a lot of them where you see they've been stolen from their mothers. They are fed human baby formula, and they can take human baby formula. So if you've got an infant and you raise it up, you feed it a bottle and such as that, that's the only thing that Bigfoot or otherwise, it's the same thing with chimps, gorillas, macaques, any of them.
Yeah.
They grow up just perfectly normal. But the point I'm making is that their behavior is completely changed. It's going to it's going to look at the human that's taking care of it as its role model. So it's going to act more like a human than it would ever a Bigfoot. I mean, yes, they'll retain some.
You may get
some of them,
and you may get some instinctual behaviors from it, but you're not going to get trained Bigfoot behaviors that its parents would bestow upon it.
You're going to get one that's domesticated, basically.
Look at the story of Jacko.
Oh, yeah. And that didn't end so well for Jacko.
No.
Poor Jacko.
Yeah, and the thing about it is I've heard a lot of people tell the story of Jacko, and I think we're the only ones that ever sympathized with Jacko.
Right.
That story just breaks my heart.
Well, there's certain times that we should just leave well enough alone, and poor Jacko should have been left alone so he could have just gone on his merry way after he got his senses about him. Yeah. But it didn't happen that way. It didn't turn out that way, and too often a human intervention, and I'm not saying that human intervention is bad, because there have been plenty of times that we've saved animals by human intervention, but then sometimes when it suddenly becomes you see the dollar sign, the almighty dollar sign hits them like, oh, I can make money off of this, then that's when things tend to go south. Well, listen, guys, I'm going to have to get off here. So, but it's been fun,
yes,
Mike.
Oh, I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming on, Mike.
Yeah, Mike.
We'll have to do it again.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Right, y'all.
Let's go. Y'all have a good one.
You too.
Bye, Forrest.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, y'all. Thank y'all for having me on. Y'all have a good one.